Hello, you lovely listeners. I'm Amy. Welcome to the Really Good Conversations podcast, where we will delve into the minds of the business people we have met in the process of launching our first card game. We will be uncovering their secrets to success, their biggest mistakes, and sharing the key lessons they have picked up en route. So, if you're looking for an engaging chinwag mixed with business insights and a good pinch of fun, you're in the right place. Let's have a really good conversation. Welcome to the Really Good Conversations podcast. Today I have the fabulous Bethany Burns Bowman, who is an award-winning PA and first mate to Captain James Watt of Scottish brewery and bar chain BrewDog. Welcome, Bethany.
Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate you having me. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today.
Likewise, I'm interested to hear a lot of the behind the scenes of what goes on in your world. But firstly, tell us the difference between a PA, personal assistant, and an EA, executive assistant, just so we're on the same page before we get into this.
Love that question. Thank you so much, Amy. So it's an interesting sort of journey, and I think it sometimes they're interchangeable positions. Sometimes there's lots of similar stuff that goes on. You're very much looking after someone, and you're entrusted with a lot of aspects to do with their life. A personal assistant or a PA is someone probably I would say that handles more the personal aspect of that human's life. An EA is an executive assistant that's probably climbed the corporate ropes. So started off as an admin assistant and kind of climbed up to work for the C-suite like CEO, COO, CFO. And then a personal assistant kind of handles the life outside of the office. Now, those things overlap all of the time because even if you're an EA looking after a high-profile CEO, there's going to be times when you need to help them out personally. So there's a lot of overlap there. So yeah, they are kind of interchangeable and just a little bit of distinguishment.
Perfect. So you've worked for James Watt and been part of the BrewDog family for 9 years. I imagine your role has touched so many aspects of the business and you've had so much insight into what James and the team are doing. Tell us a little bit more about your journey and the role that you are currently doing.
For sure. Thanks, Amy. So I started with James almost 9 years ago. It was kind of funny because I was working at a wealth management firm and I was a little bit bored. I was sitting in a meeting taking notes and applied for BrewDog at the same time. I'm a bit of a multitasker there. So I ended up having no less than 4 interviews with James. The last one was over a beer. And we ended up going from there. He'd never had an assistant before. So I was able to kind of mold him to my will, if you will. And it's been great. So we've kind of progressed from me being an assistant to him to I started off as an executive assistant with him as the CEO and was able to see this like eye-watering trajectory of growth with BrewDog. And then after COVID hit, we kind of, had to learn how to work best together in a totally different environment. So after the travel bans were kind of lifted, I moved to Greece for a while and lived there for a little bit. We worked remotely. And then he started traveling again, and we realized that we could kind of accomplish the same things, whether if it's 10 o'clock at night on email and we're in the same country, or if it's 10 o'clock at night on email and we're in different places. So we were able to really kind of refine that and work that out. And now I live in Florida. But in that transition, I've moved from his EA at BrewDog to his chief of staff. So I kind of overlook the full suite of things from a 50,000 foot view. So I get to see and interact with the BrewDog EA that I helped hire for him. I work with investment firms. I work with his portfolio, his properties, the staff that we have there. I manage them. So it's just kind of expanded by leaps and bounds to beyond BrewDog. I think that almost became too much. And so when you've got a pressure point like that, it kind of informs change and a paradigm shift. And we were able to feel that pressure point and figure out what worked best. And it worked for me to kind of like pop up to chief of staff and kind of oversee his empire, if you will, and kind of help him out best in that way, keeping everything on track that he's got his hands in.
Wow. So it sounds like you have a lot of plates to spin as well. And I think what's really interesting, and this was why I was so keen to chat to you, is people who are perhaps the founders of the businesses and, perhaps have, become well-known CEOs like James. They are the figure people perhaps know and think of when they think of the business and the brand. But actually, in reality, there is people who are part of his team, part of that journey, who are really doing a hell of a lot behind the scenes. And chatting just briefly to Alex before I jumped on this call, I said to Alex how, Bethany is the first mate to Captain James. And he said, Amy, that's a bit like you and me, because you're the captain, but I actually do all of the work as the first mate. So I think, reality is of what actually is in your role, and, people like yourselves in these EA and PA roles actually doing an awful lot behind the scenes. Tell us a little bit about, what it is like to work with creative founders, should we say visionaries like James. What do you see that makes them tick?
That's such a unique question, Amy, and it's interesting to see. It's definitely a different brain, and I think I have the different brain that complements his. So to explain that, I would say that James is completely interesting and creative and thinks in a different way, not even outside of the box, but not even where the box is located. I mean, he's just got a different way of looking at things. He's not troubled with self-doubt or worried that he can't make something work. It'll just work, and we just have to figure out how. So when he throws something out, I'm very much the problem solution person, or if this, then that. And so there are a lot of busy bees behind the scene, but he's got this beautiful mind that just pops things out. And I think what I've noticed about him and other high-performing entrepreneurs is that they are very calm, because the stress disseminates downward, right? So they come up with an idea, and it's all the other people that kind of have to like figure out how we're going to do this, right? But they're very calm people. He asks a lot of questions. He listens. And I think that's one of the most interesting differences when you see somebody who is unique as that in an entrepreneur versus maybe somebody in upper management, for example. James just asks a lot of questions in a very measured way, and he tends to be very calm. He looks after his health really well, and he doesn't begin with the end in sight. So you mentioned to me earlier, as I was preparing for this, the 7 habits of highly effective people. And one of those tenets is to begin with the end in mind. And I think for an average person, that makes a lot of sense. But for high-performing entrepreneurs, they don't even have that end thing in mind. They just have the idea, and then the end thing sort of evolves, and it almost spurs on more things. So it's not like it's a finality of here's the idea and here's the final finished product. It's more like, here's the idea, go with it, and then we'll evolve it from there.
Wow, that's really refreshing to hear, actually, because yes, you do often read or see the statements that think of that end, goal for the company or for the organization. And just looking, yes, at what BrewDog has achieved and what they've been involved in, from beers to bars, hotels, spirits, hand sanitizer, you can see this, was that always the plan at the beginning, or was it actually, it's to create the awesome beers, and then these other opportunities or ideas have actually just come, down the track.
Yeah, well, I think that the other thing that's unique to consider is that there really isn't a finish line. So that's the kind of in keeping with that same thought process, right? So they're not looking at success for this as like a goal to accomplish. It's constantly being refined and constantly being improved. It's a constant. So it's never like, I did that, I can stop and rest now. That's precisely these people. They don't rest. They just keep going. Their brains keep thinking, and it's not a a means to an end. It's not something to reach. It's just spurs on more ideas.
Yeah. And do you ever have those conversations with James of, okay, are you going to get to a certain age or stage or thing that you'll think, okay, I'm now going to either step back or do something else? Or
one of the most unique conversations touching on this that I had with him early on when we started working together, I said, you've accomplished so much. Like, do you ever look back and think of how far you've come, or do you save articles and all the things to kind of catalog your progress? And he looked at me in the most sort of dumbfounded way. And he said, why would I do that? I'm not done yet. I'm still working. I'm still going. So it's not and I think that's the insight that I had into that mindset, is that it's really, he really doesn't think of it in finite terms like that. It's just always continual ideas and growth and accomplishments as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to see. And even when I think of people, like Richard Branson and everything, he's done with Virgin, and even just more recently in the last few years, introducing the cruise ships. And you can't help but think, gosh, are you not ready to just, chill out on Necker Island yet? But there's obviously that continual thirst, excitement, creativity, desire that's there. And doesn't go away.
And I think another idea around that too is that the tighter we hold on to something, or the idea or identity of ourselves, then the harder it is to grow beyond it. So if you have this mindset where you can let go and you just keep evolving and keep going, then you're not holding on to this this little ball of identity that you think you're all about. And you've got these tenets and this defines you. So if it's not defined and you don't cling to that little ball, then that can just kind of be effervesced throughout the universe, and you can just keep going. It's not going to hold you back in a sense and define you in that way. So it's interesting to think about it that way too.
Yes, that is really good insight. And do you ever find in your role, you're having to rein in someone like James with some of these creative ideas or next thoughts or tasks that he may be thinking, and you might have to go, do you know what, actually, we need to focus on this right now. Do you ever find yourself needing to do that?
It's a great question, but it also unlocks a new insight. So if, for instance, he wants to host something or do something and it needs to happen tomorrow, and the normal, train of thought might be, oh my goodness, we need time to do this. We need time for that. Have we considered this? And it's just well, no, just do it, because it'll be successful either way. So I love that part of speaking with such a bright brain, because it allows you a different perspective. I'm very much black and white, and I can very much action things, and I'm transactional, and I can get lots of things done. But it's very interesting to take things on from a completely different perspective and understand that maybe you don't need all of those steps and that type OCD brain of yours. Maybe you can just do it.
Yeah. So you obviously, work together as a really nice complementary duo with this different perhaps thinking and different perspectives between the two of you. So I'll move now into asking a few more questions around the sort of topic of PA and EA. What type of things does PA's role or EA's role actually cover? And what things do you think some people may not realise or expect is part of those roles?
Great question. So it covers a lot more strategic thinking than I think somebody might realize. So you almost have to have a map in your head of, how do I make all of these balls spin at the same time? If I have a constraint here, how do I make it work? If I do this now, what's the impact to the business? What's the impact to the relationships that I work with? So it's a lot more strategic thinking than just transactional stuff, like putting something in the calendar. You really kind of have to really cultivate the relationships that you have with people so that when you need an expert or you need a helping hand, you've got it, but also understand the impact on how that relationship can expand to greater opportunities and how your actions trickle down.
And I think in my mind, almost particularly when we think of the EA role, as you said, was that strategic thinking, is it's almost like perhaps cloning that, executive, that CEO, because you need to really almost be another version of them, obviously with your own thoughts and perspectives, but you're wanting to be on the same page.
In a sense, I will say, though, it's a totally imperative to think 20 steps ahead and mitigate those outcomes where you can. But that doesn't mean that it's always going to work out that way. So as much as you try to think like them and read their same books and understand that world that they're in, you have to be fully aware that you still might get it wrong. And humans are capricious and it's going to be something totally different than it started out to be. So, yes, you have to think like them, but you have to think 20 steps ahead in 50 different directions to see if you've kind of gotten the end result.
God, that's fascinating. Have you ever found yourself in your career in situations where you just think, how am I in this situation? How is this happening?
Yeah, that's a great opportunity for a fun story. So when I first started with James, he was visiting some places in China for either brewing opportunities and bar opportunities. And so we had an itinerary of where he was going to go, and it was pretty confined. We got what he needed for that travel and sent him on his way. So he's all checked in, and I'm blissfully so happy to just have a nice week with no disruption. And it turns out I get a text from him to say, I am being detained in China. And so I'm like, how do I figure this one out? And at the same time, he had tweeted this on his social media. And I was like, oh my gosh. And someone had commented oh, rookie move. And I'll send you my resume for your next EA. And it was just the most brutal, crushing day. And it turned out that he wanted to go somewhere that we hadn't gotten a visa for. So it wasn't planned in the itinerary. He argued with the guy and he got detained for a couple of hours. So it made for such an interesting story. But at the end of the day, I felt like I was a giraffe and drag at the Kentucky Derby, just trying to get over the finish line. It was something.
Wow. I cannot imagine having to deal with that. And I know in my previous careers when I've done, some of the event work and such, and we've sent people, this when I was in London, and, we sent competition winners and executives off to the Super Bowl in America. And then you're waking up that morning with, people complaining about perhaps, their hotel rooms or other issues because we hadn't been allowed to sort of send someone to be that on the ground person. So I think certainly over different time zones, and you're look at the phone, it's oh no.
It can be brutal.
Exactly. I can imagine you saying to James, stick to the itinerary. I made you the itinerary and you have gone off piste.
I would have loved to, but I think I just had a beautiful gin and tonic that evening or something.
I thought, thank goodness he's been out of wherever he's been held. And what sort of challenges have you faced over the years? That's a bit of a challenge, the one you were just telling us about. But any particular challenges that you found working in this side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most interesting challenges that really provides a lot of brain work and thinking and careful pursuit is dealing with media. So it's so much easier to know your job from the back of your hand and be able to deal with all sorts of things, travel, board members, investors, all of that. But I think that the unpredictable thing that's the hardest to deal with is media. And they're either your best friend or your worst enemy. And I think that handling them with some grace at arm's length is probably the best bet, but they certainly present challenges from time to time.
Especially, I imagine, yeah, just in the current world, that we live in, with obviously social media, digital communication and connection is something could be out there, in a quick second, before anyone realizes or has the time to actually, deal with it. Never mind, a lot of what does get produced, in particularly the British media, may not be particularly accurate as well.
Yeah, so it is definitely a challenge, but I think the interesting thing too about the media is that people in my role as executive assistant or chief of staff, no matter what it is, we tend to be empaths a little bit, and so we understand not only how to deal with the situation that's before us, but at the same time, we also know how it's going to impact the principal that we work with. So if it's positive news, you're like, oh my gosh, great. He's going to be so happy. And if it's negative news and largely unfounded, we also know that, oh my gosh, that's going to be so awful. That's like a mushroom cloud, in every direction. And, it's dealing with how best to support him in that sense too. So it's not just dealing with the whatever it is presented by the media on the face of it. It's also understanding the impact on everybody else around.
Yeah. And before we get into our round of quick fire questions, I wanted to ask, for anyone listening who's perhaps considering, bringing a PA into the business, what tips would you give them for finding someone and onboarding somebody?
So I'd say the best way to do that is to have that conversation. You're going to want to find somebody who loves and thrives in organized chaos. You're definitely going to want somebody who can have that aerial aspect view where they can see the big picture and be able to respond to that. And I think the hugest advice that I have for someone wanting to take on someone to support them is to have that unequivocal trust and to be able to let go. So these people are going to handle your peripheral responsibilities. They're going to handle your life. And it is a very rare thing to have that sort of access to somebody. And I feel humbled by it every day. And I feel grateful that James entrusts his life and his business to me to look after. So make sure that you have a really good, solid foundation and trust that person. And then you have to let go. You have to let them do what they do and, let them fly a little bit. I think even with hiring an EA at BrewDog, when I took on the chief of staff role, that was the hardest thing for me to do, was to let go a little bit, and knowing that I know that role inside and out, but not micromanage it and just let it be what it is. Trust that I hired the right person and be able to kind of shift focus and look more strategically at things. So let go.
Devon, any tips for how people can practice letting go?
I think it's almost like that trust game that we played as kids back in the day, where you close your eyes and lean back and you have to trust that your best friend is going to catch you. It's just like that. So I think you just have to do it. You just have to, here's a task and go for it. And then sometimes you can be so delighted by a different perspective, a different way of thinking, and it maybe could be more efficient or just a different aspect of looking at something. So I think it's really awesome and refreshing, and you'll be delighted and surprised by letting go.
That's great. Because I think definitely we can all slip into those sorts of phrases, if you will, of, if you want a job doing right, do it yourself. And I know that comes from my father's generation, shall we say. I know that's something he's definitely said. Whereas obviously over, my career, I've really tried to exercise that sort of, no, not trying to do everything, myself. I can see where it's easy to slip into that habit and that thinking.
I guess so. But at the same time, too, it's good to have the understanding of knowing how a role works and knowing how you could execute it and do it yourself. But it is super refreshing, I will say, to have somebody else take it on and handle it their way and let them try it and let them impress you. And oftentimes, I really get to see a different way of doing things, because I don't want to always be that person that does it. It's the way I've always done it. That's how we're going to do it. I really want to learn. And the only way you can keep learning in life is to try things a different way. And sometimes you get in your own way of knowing that this is the only way that you've ever done it. but having someone else show you or teach you is great. It's a gift.
That is amazing. Right, well, I am going to jump into some quick fire questions from our really good conversations pack. So I know I'm probably putting you on the spot here, but I'll kick off with question number 1. How has your life turned out differently from what you had expected?
Oh my gosh, these are great. I'm like terrified and excited all at once. I got to tell you, Amy. So how has it turned out differently than I expected? I probably expected to be a California girl, just growing up by the beach. A lot of my family are teachers and involved in education. So I probably thought that was going to be my path. So I'm really surprised and delighted I am where I am. I had a stint as a flight attendant out of Santa Barbara for a while. I loved that. And I think that's what got me into being interested in learning from the brightest brains and learning from different people. And everyone's got a very interesting, fascinating story. And I think that having a flight with a group of people that is a captive audience for that time, and you get to speak with them and understand their path and their journey, that kind of spurred me on. I'm not sure how I ended up in corporate life after that. Maybe it was the outfits and I like the shoes, who knows? But I'm really grateful for that whole journey anyway. And I'm so ecstatic of where I am. I've met wonderful people from all around the world. I've gotten to do the most wonderful things and travel and learn stuff I never, ever would have learned before in as far as beer, as far as venture capitalism, investments, and how different cultures work. I mean, it's just fascinating, and I'm super, super grateful.
Oh, I can just imagine, just hearing you and just even seeing some of the stuff that obviously BrewDog has been involved with. Yeah, there's been so many things that are going on. And I equally find people's stories, their paths, their journeys really fascinating to hear. Question number 2. What is, you're getting 3 questions. Question number 2, what is one of your pet hates?
Ooh. That's really so easy for me because I'm so OCD type A. So there's lots of little things that freak me out. So I remember there was a time I had my table set and I was hosting my sister and her family, and it was just perfectly set. You had the charger, the linen napkins, everything in its right place. And she just walked by and just tweaked a fork in the wrong direction, like the salad fork or something. And I'm like, oh, that just kills me because I need to have everything in order. I was in Barcelona once, and there was they have beautiful tile on the ground, just the sidewalks. It's amazing. But there was one piece that was put in the wrong way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so incongruent. I can't even cannot deal with that. Had to cross the street.
Fantastic. That is, wow. And that's almost a tiny insight, obviously, of how meticulous and considered perhaps your brain is when we think of this role that, you do and working with James, that you've got, I guess, that real particular and can really laser in on things being in a certain way. So that's obviously a fascinating, skill that obviously enables you to actually do what you do. That is really interesting.
I don't know if it's a skill or a curse or a gift, but it's something.
That's brilliant. And question number 3 is, what is your biggest fear?
Aside from the tile being wrong on the sidewalk, my biggest fear is not. I'd say my biggest fear is getting complacent. I always want to continually learn. I want to be more compassionate. I want to be more empathetic. I want to understand how people work and what makes them work, and know that not everything has to be one way. It can be so many different ways. I want to keep reading. I want to keep, kind of being a good student at life. So I guess my biggest fear would become complacent. And while some days that looks so attractive to just sit down and watch an old game show for 10 hours straight, it's just not me. What I wish for isn't necessarily what I want. I would really want to keep going and learning everything I can in this life.
That's really inspiring to hear. I really love that. So you're off the hook now. You survived the 3 questions. You're all good. The last question that I ask all of my guests who join us is, if you could ask somebody one question, who are dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Now, Amy, I love this question so much. And I have to tell you that you were kind enough to let me know it was coming. And I have thought about this for days. It has plagued me. I've asked friends and family, I'm like, what would you answer this? What would you do? And I think I'll just be completely honest with my first instinct here. That the person that I would ask is Dale Carnegie. And what I would ask him is, how would you apply your principles to the digital day and age? So wow. Dale Carnegie taught us a very specific way of speaking with people and a mannerism and manners and how to handle people with grace and aplomb and be able to take it from the boardroom to the dinner table. So I think in this digital world, we don't talk to each other anymore. We're forced to be snippy or snipe back. It's taught us to be judgmental. Sure, it's connected us to a huge audience and people from all over the world, but we don't necessarily speak to each other anymore, and certainly not with the grace that I think is probably due to our average human being, our fellow human being. So you never know if you're in the grocery store and the person that's so nice to you to hand you that loaf of bread that you can't reach, is that the same person that said oh my gosh, I would never buy that outfit that they're selling on, Facebook Marketplace or whatever, So I just find it interesting. And that's who I would ask. I would definitely ask Dale Carnegie, how do you bridge the gap between the world in which we had to be face-to-face and communicate into the digital world. And I think that his principles still hold true. And I think they're great. I think we still have to show a genuine interest in each other. We still have to be respectful. We still have to give honest appreciation. We still really should probably avoid criticism and condemnation. And I think that's the one thing that we do to an extreme now is that we criticize so quickly. And I think that was one of his principles, is just to take that down a notch, and really kind of be empathetic first. Avoid arguing. There's no need. Maybe we just have a conversation and we understand in more of a debate format rather than an argument. It shouldn't be an attack on someone or sully their soul. We should just be able to talk it through, and admit when you're wrong. I think that people often on social media in the digital world, they're just stalwart and they think that they're right. And maybe in their head and in their life, they are right, but it doesn't mean that it's the same for everybody else. So I think we need to encourage each other to talk and encourage each other to engage in such a way that's still kind and it's still respectful and it still shows manners. And I think that's the only way we can grow and learn. So, but if you had any other insight, I would love to hear it from Dale Carnegie, because I really respect him as a businessman and as a human.
That's wonderful. Oh, well, that is a really great answer. And I will be, diving a bit further into his principles and checking that out. So thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. It's been so interesting to chat to you. And I think you've just shared so much, really great insights and great nuggets there. How can people, connect with you or find out a little bit more about you?
Oh my goodness, Amy, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. It's been such a delight to speak with you. You're so lovely and energetic. And I wish I had just a tenth of that, tenth of that energy. But people can reach me. I'll drop you my Instagram details and my LinkedIn. And I'm open to speaking with anybody about anything. I think it's one of the great arts that needs to be kind of resurrected, is just good communication. And to your point, those cards are just perfect for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, fantastic to meet you, and thank you.
Lovely to meet you too. Take care, Amy.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on today's guests. And if really good conversations are your thing, hit subscribe and join us next time for more business journeys, insights and banter.